Hello, YouTube University students, and welcome back to Opus Garage. Now, in the garage today, I need to bleed the brakes on my son's Jeep Grand Cherokee. I'm going to give you some tips on how you can do that when you're by yourself in the garage. Let's get started. Now, the way I usually bleed brakes when I'm by myself is by using this. It's a one-person brake bleeding tool. You take this end right here, you hook it onto your caliper bleeder. You open up your caliper bleeder, and then you'll have an air hose attached right here. You pull the trigger, and basically it does a suction type effect where it creates the air blowing through here, creates suction in here, and it sucks the fluid through the tube. You can see when you have bubbles, you can see when you have solid fluid, and it's nice and handy. This one happens to be made by Mac. There are several companies that make them. I believe that Harbor Freight even has their own brand. They're relatively inexpensive, but if this isn't something you do for a living, you're probably not going to want to spend the money on something like this. So, what are some other ways you can do this job when you're by yourself? An inexpensive way to do it by yourself is get yourself a little syringe. This one does not have the rubber grommet at the bottom of it. I would say that you're probably going to want the little rubber grommet just for better suction. This is actually for mixing two-stroke oil, but same basic principle. You stick it on your bleeder valve so it's good and snug. You open up your bleeder valve, and then as you can see, as you pull back on the plunger, it starts sucking air and fluid out of the bleeder. And once you're just getting fluid and no more air, basically you're done. Now, last but not least is a method that I learned way back when I was a teenager and first started working on vehicles. And this is probably the most inexpensive and one of the easiest ways to do it. You get yourself a cup and you get you some brake fluid, and you pour the brake fluid, I don't know, fill it up maybe a quarter of a cup, third of a cup, or whatever. And then you want to get yourself a piece of clear tubing that is the size that'll fit over the nipple of your bleeder valve, and make sure that it fits on there good and snug so that it can't suck air. I'm using the one off my Mac brake fluid bleeder, and the very first thing that you want to do is, or the very first thing that I usually do if it's like a new caliper which is full of air, I usually open up the bleeder, take the cap off the master cylinder, and I let the bleeder, let gravity do its thing and let the bleeder fill with fluid. Once you start seeing fluid, you'll see bubbles and you'll see fluid coming out of your bleeder. Then you want to shut that. Then you want to take your piece of tubing, and you want tubing that you can see through, so you don't use a piece of rubber hose or whatever. And you put that on there, and then you take your cup with some brake fluid. I always aim the tubing up because gravity will still do its thing, and then you put your the other end of your tube down inside your cup, into the fluid. And then at that point you can open up your bleeder, and if you want to, you can get in the vehicle and you can push on the brake pedal, and it'll flow fluid up in there. But when you release the pedal, instead of sucking the air, it'll suck fluid up in here. Eventually this whole tube, so you're not going to want a tube this long, but eventually the whole tube will be full of brake fluid. And then at that point, you can pump it several times. The method that I normally use is I usually get the fluid flowing, and I'll just go ahead and let that hang down. But give me just a second to kind of get this to where it's not gonna, and then I'm gonna zoom in so you can see how fluid is flowing up in that tube. Now, if there was still air in the caliper, you'd be seeing bubbles, little bubbles, more bubbles, and eventually all you would see is what you see now, which is just solid brake fluid. And then at that point you can close your bleeder and you're pretty well done. Put everything all back together, take it out for a drive. If they still feel a little bit spongy, come back, hook it all up again, and then open it up, and you might still have a couple little bubbles in there that got trapped somewhere. But this is probably the easiest and cheapest way to do this. And like I said, I've been using this method since I was a teenager, and I'm in my 50s now, and it's never failed me. And I've done it hundreds of times. So that's going to conclude this video, and hopefully you got something out of it. If you did, please hit the like and the subscribe button. And until next time, keep living your best life. Get on out in the garage and fix something.